I'm Barbara Woods, and I'd like to welcome you to this campus conversation on diversity. Our approach today will be to have several people make some specific comments about their experience either as individuals or on working on various things. And then we'll have some opportunity for people to start asking questions and talking about issues and concerns around diversity for them. Let me just briefly tell you who we have with us so that you'll have a sense of the persons as they come up. I'm Barbara Woods, and I worked on the community conversation on diversity, and I work with the Iowa State Extension Service. We have Francesca, who is with the, let me get it right, she's the Assistant Director of Equal Opportunity for Iowa State. Next we have Bree, who is an undergraduate student. And lastly, we have Ashley, who is a graduate student. Each of us will make some comments. Then we'll have some opportunity to have comments, concerns, questions, and try to have this give and take so that people might put perspectives out on the table and get some feedback on them. To start this off, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Ames community conversations. And my first question would be, how many of you participated in one of the conversation groups? Okay. Well, starting over a year ago, so in about November 2007, there were some concerns around town or some comments heard about those people and violence and just a whole bunch of stuff. In talking about that amongst a number of people, several people came together and thought about what could help us have a better sense of who other people are. And this concept of a community conversation came about. And depending on your background, you may have various notions of what a conversation is about. But there's something called everyday democracy that comes off of the East Coast, and they created a system for having conversation on very explosive topics that typically people don't talk about. And one of the things we recognized here in Ames was that it was those people, and let me just put it in the context that we heard it, those people from Chicago were creating havoc for other people in Ames. Now, as we had a set of people talk about this and try to figure out what could go on in terms of this conversation, when we talk about who do you know, it became very evident that a whole bunch of us didn't know anybody but ourselves. And so we were making comments about those people and who's causing problems in Ames and why don't they act like us based on conversations that were misinformed or underinformed or biased or whatever you want to call it. So out of this kind of a framework, we had something called community conversations. They happened this past fall over 4 weeks. During that time, roughly something over 100 people got together over 4 weeks in one of 10 conversation groups. In a conversation they used, and this resource is available online through ISU Extension, they had an organized discussion guide called How Can We Build a Stronger Ames That Includes Me? And the idea was to focus the conversation relative to Ames so that we had some sense of give and take, respectful of one another, but understanding there was a lot of variety in the community. From this conversation where this concept in my mind called freedom of choice, nobody was beat up on to participate. It was open to everybody in the community. All kinds of marketing was done to get people to participate. And based on people saying, I want to participate, they were assigned to groups based on when they were available. So when we talk diversity within these conversation groups, it's possible that you could go to a group and everybody looked just like you. But one of the things that people found in those groups, when you have a guided conversation with a trained facilitator, you have a very different conversation than if you just go into a room and you don't have any direction for your conversation. So in every group, there were 2 people who were trained facilitators who did not participate in the conversation. Their whole task was to kind of guide people through these 4 weeks of conversation. People in the conversation got to talk about who they thought they were, what they thought the community was. And then they had some resources that helped them see a different picture of the community than maybe they thought they had. And ultimately, the objective of that group was to say, what would you like to move forward in this community to try to solve some problem or some issue that you found as you had this conversation? So on what is the 5th session, 2 people from each of the groups came to that 5th meeting time, and brought at least 2 ideas from that conversation group. And at that 5th session, which is called an action forum, people were invited to say what's most important of these items that came from the subgroups. And based on that conversation, based on that action forum, we had 6 team ideas that came out, in which there are now 6 groups of people trying to move these forward in the community. And the action teams are Strengthening Neighborhoods, One Community Coordination, United Aims, Welcome Fest / Resource Fair, Education First, and Ongoing Dialogues. All of these things speak to wanting our community to be the very best it can be, and to include each of us in what is aims. From the conversation, and I actually participated in one, my group was probably the most diverse that you could possibly have. We had race, religion, gender, educational experience, economics. We had age. We had a variety. We had people who had been in welfare. We had people who had never been on welfare. We had people who experienced a variety of kinds of things that influence how people think about others. In general, through the conversation, I would say that many people would say they had not had experience with other people. If you ask people, who do you know other than the folks in your family who don't look like you, don't act like you, don't have money like you, it's amazing how few people have those experiences. As I said, this conversation came about because there were folks out there talking about those people. I think one of the things we got from the conversation is that those people become us very easily. And that as we interact with other people, it becomes important to represent someone other than ourselves. We assume certain things about people. And so as we talk about diversity, again, it started out pretty much a race kind of thing, but there was some economics, there was some uncomfortableness with walking down the streets of Ames and seeing someone who doesn't look like you, and saying they shouldn't be here. So again, we were trying to have a conversation, trying to move people to a point of thinking about how do we make Ames the very best place in the world. Again, we have 6 groups now moving past that point. We hope we're going to have some opportunity to put some additional things on the table. People can still participate, not necessarily in the conversation that was just had, but in the action groups, and start to build from there, and or create new conversations that people might participate in. My experience with the community conversation was that probably I've been in this town for 30 years. It's the first time that I ever had a conversation with a group of people about something that makes people uncomfortable. In a group, in which they did not necessarily get offended, they may have been, but they were able to be cordial and ask questions and deliberate around some topic that they believed was important to others. So I encourage you, at least if you've not read the report, that you do. And in reading the report, ask yourself the same questions that happened within those community conversations about where you stand on a number of issues, because it does lead us to maybe do different things as we interact with people. As I said, as we move through this, we'll come back and have time for questions and conversation.
Now, I had just mentioned to Barb how excited I was to be sitting behind the skirted table because I forgot to change my boots, and then she makes me stand up. My name is Francesca Galarraga, and I'm the Assistant Director for Equal Opportunity and Diversity here at Iowa State. I've been with the university now for about a year, and the responsibilities of my office are primarily the affirmative action officers for the university, and also managing diversity from a discrimination and harassment perspective, and making sure that we have a university that is welcoming and that is safe for all who participate and who all are on campus. I want to just piggyback off a couple of things that Barb said. The conversations that we had really focused on how we look at one another from different perspectives. And for the most part, it stemmed from you look different from me. And what does that mean to me when I come into a room, or when I come into an activity that's happening in the community, or even here on campus when I step into a classroom? one of the things that we do from a diversity perspective in our office is look at affirmative action. And as a federally funded institution, it's our responsibility to report numbers back to the federal government. And part of the misconception that usually happens when I mention affirmative action is the fact that it's some form of reverse discrimination, it's some form of favoritism, it's some form of bringing a lower caliber of individuals into the university. And so I always like to start off with how this concept of affirmative action reporting came into being. And a lot of that, believe it or not, started back in 1963 with an Equal Pay Act. So at the time when it started, it really had absolutely nothing to do with race. It actually had a lot more to do with gender and pay equity. And from there, we began to develop different laws. So in 1964, we developed the Civil Rights Act, which started talking about race and color and gender. And then we went to 1965 when President Johnson signed an executive order and started really to develop more and more differing groups. And it's really more groups that are underrepresented in ways that we had never been thinking about them before. And so we fast forward to today, where our affirmative action law really states that we are trying to create an equitable environment for people to come into any environment. And so the words that you will hear that are associated with affirmative action are good faith efforts. Is the university, is the federally funded institution really providing good faith efforts when they're looking for ways to advertise to different individuals? So the concept that we are trying to hire people that look differently from us is somewhat of a misconception. What we're looking to do is exactly what Community Conversations on Diversity was looking to do, which is really look at the people who are in our community, understand those different experiences, understand those different perspectives, and allow all of these differing ideas to come into the conversation and to be part of the long-term planning of our community, to be part of the way that we're going to move forward to the next century. You know, our university prides itself on being innovators and taking that next scientific, taking that next technological step and helping the world succeed. Well, the way for us to do that is to fully integrate all of those different ways of being and all of those different thoughts. And so how we do it here at the university is really to look at groups of individuals that we think can enhance the conversation. And we do that through hiring, we do that through our student recruiting, and we do that through the retention programs. So we look at how do we bring individuals who maybe aren't necessarily used to being in a city like Ames, whether it's the weather, whether it's the Midwest, whether it's just being in a small town or relatively small town, how do we engage those individuals to come and to stay and to understand that they are a vital part of what we're trying to do and really a part of what's going to make Ames and the university exciting for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And so from my perspective, as I stand in front of you today to talk a little bit about our affirmative action program, I want to put it to you in that context in terms of the programs that we have in place are really programs to help us continue those conversations and really continue them in a way that we are able to have multiple perspectives present in an environment where perhaps some policies may not allow us to have that. So for example, 30 years ago, if I were to come into Ames, I think safely assume that the population would have been almost all Caucasian. Use those almost all Caucasian caveats. But now, if I come into Ames and look at it, there's probably a little bit of a difference. And the reason for that difference is multiple. One, it's the fact that we have a diverse pool of talent that's being attracted to Ames and that's coming to Ames and that they're establishing roots here, which is very important. It's also that we have been actively looking at ways to diversify the population. One of the advantages of actively looking at that, or one of the ways that we do that, is through our federally funded programs, which is the Affirmative Action Program. And so I'm going to stop talking now, let the rest of the team have some chance to share their opportunities. And then if you want to ask me specific questions about our Affirmative Action Program and what that looks like, I'll be more than happy to answer those.
Hi everyone. My name is Bree McGriff. I'm a senior in political science and sociology here at Iowa State. And I guess my role here today is to talk about the undergraduate experience here at Iowa State. Both Barbara and Francesca spoke about the need for community, and I guess that's kind of the main focus of what I'm going to talk about today. In terms of community, I think that's probably the biggest thing as a student of color that I face here. The need for a community that's both supportive of me socially and academically. So what I was going to say was, if you were to look at my resume, I've had a lot of amazing opportunities through being a student here at Iowa State. I had the chance to be president of a number of clubs, be very involved, to be traveled because of my experiences. So I'm very, I would say, well-rounded academically. But my main focus would be the social experience here at Iowa State. And so Francesca was talking about bringing diversity here to Iowa State and to the Ames community. It's important to have diversity, but I would say it's also important that that diversity be incorporated into the main functions within the university. So having diverse people here is great, but if they're not contributing to the conversation or if they're feeling alienated by being here, is that really a positive experience for both the student and for other student groups here at Iowa State? And so what I've done, because I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and so when I first got here, it was definitely kind of an alienating experience, being one of the few people of color and then trying to navigate this large university. So I became more involved in the university. I'm on the YWCA board. I do a lot of different things to help the community, but it always seems like it's only those few faces that you see at every single event. You always see the same people at every single thing. You see the few student leaders. And so my main goal, I guess, and probably for the rest of the university the time I'm here, is really about building leadership and kind of expanding the faces that you always see at these same events. And so to me, I'm actually trying to put together a Black leadership, I guess, forum later on to teach other students how to become more involved in activities here at Iowa State, because that's the only way people change. If everybody at the discussion is always the same, how does anything change in the future? Nothing does if it's the same people talking about the same issues. So my experience at Iowa State has been very fulfilling academically. I'm going to go on, I'm going to have a successful career, but socially, not so much. And so I think that's part of the dialogue that you need to have from a student's point of view, because we're here for academics, but it's that social experience that we're here for as well. And I want to have the experience I see on TV. I want to see the college, I want to see the Greek sororities, I want to see the party, I want to see the social experiences. Not saying that's all we're here for, but it's just something that should be provided for, and both the support academically and socially that students need. And so if I were to ask for anything from the university in terms of increasing diversity, increasing the links and relationships, not just me being here, but my relationship with other organizations, like with other Greek organizations, with other councils, with other things, increasing the relationships, that's what's more lasting than just the conversation. So that would be
Okay, my name is Ashley Ratude, and I'm a first-year master's student in the Textiles and Clothing program here at Iowa State, but I also did my undergrad here in apparel design and merchandising. So as an undergrad, I came here as an MVP Multicultural Vision Program Scholar, which is for minority first-generation college students. I was involved in NCORE, ISCORE, SSSP, all types of organizations, but I realize now as a master's student, I don't really see those type of things transitioning from an undergrad to a professional. You know, there's not a lot of professional networks for minority students who are maybe wanting to go to conferences, things like that. So as a graduate student, I'm working with Francesca in the Equal Opportunity and Diversity Office, trying to, I guess, see those faces in faculty and professors, and maybe making some type of trickle down for us graduate students who are aspiring to be professors or at a higher educational level. You know, we don't see a lot of those faces. And I think it's very important that not only do we enrich lives for students, but it's also important to enrich lives or academic lives for faculty and staff here at Iowa State. So that way, as minority students, we can understand, you know, that these things need to happen. Everything is kind of a cyclical nature, I guess. And so that's just what I'm doing here at Iowa State now. I've changed from an undergrad experience to maybe being more professional and hoping that I can help lives of other faculty members here at Iowa State as well as graduate
students.
We have someone who wanted to make some comments.
Well, I was very pleased to be asked to come to make a couple of comments about the experience I had involved in participating in the community conversations on diversity that took place. October? Yeah, October and early November. We actually met on election night.
Could you give us your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Ingrid Lilligren, and I am a professor in the Department of Art and Design where I teach ceramics, and I'm also this year's chair of the University Committee on Women. So one of the aspects, this was not the first time I had participated in a guided conversation. I've done this in the past, and I was curious about it because I moved here from Los Angeles where I saw myself reflected in the people around me. And it was a little bit of a shock to come into a more homogeneous population and not see the kinds of both diversity in terms of racial diversity, but also diversity in terms of ideas about the way to go about doing things, and also diversity in terms of strata across incomes. And I was curious to find out more about Ames. As a professor at the university, I feel like I've led a kind of isolated life in a way, that I know less about this community than I know about other communities. And I don't think that's the fault of the university. I think that's really up to me. But it's partly just the way that I work and the responsibilities that I have. It was very eye-opening. And the important thing that I learned is that you never get to a place where you aren't, where it's not important to have these conversations. And the group that I joined and will be contributing to is a group that is going to foster ongoing dialogues, because the more opportunities that we create for people to sit down, have civil discourse, the more that we model the kind of behavior that we hope others will practice, students, undergrads, grad students, as well as our colleagues, the more we demystify what it is to be part of a group, and the more we understand. I've always been interested as an artist. One of the things that we talk about in art is what makes for appropriate aesthetics. And so there's a word that we use to describe that. It's called the canon of what's acceptable. And it's been my perspective that the canon of what's acceptable is a fairly narrow range. And the canon shifts, but the range doesn't expand. It just sort of goes, okay, this year it's pop art, now a decade later it's figurative art, and the canon stays narrow. I'm interested in figuring out how we can expand and broaden that. And it really happens only with people committing to taking the first step to saying, gee, maybe I should know a little bit more about anything. You can name a category, name something. And Bree, I just wanted to say that I moved here, and as a single woman, for the first 5 or 6 years, I could count on the fingers of one hand the number of times I got invited to have dinner by somebody who wasn't like another single person like me. It was a very alienating experience to move here. And partly that's, I'm going to take some responsibility for that. I tend to be socially a little bit shy. But partly it's the culture of a conservative entity like Iowa State University. So rest assured, I've been partying heartily since then. But it took me deciding that I wanted to make that difference. And I have to take some responsibility for making things change. So that's one of the reasons why I decided to participate.
Let's open up and have people make comments, ask questions, either of the ones of us up here, or you, in a conversation, you can ask other people within the context of who's here what they think. So let's open it up and have people start asking questions and or making comments. because this is a conversation about where you are at this institution and how you feel and what you do of what you can and cannot do. So let's open it up and have some people make some comments. Ask questions.
Any brave souls?
You don't have to be brave. Tell us who you are.
My name is Eugenio Matubag, and I started teaching here at Iowa State University in 1987. So I grew up in Southern California, San Diego. I was born in the Philippines, but I feel like almost a native island now. Let me take this opportunity to point out these photographs and these narratives hanging on the walls, produced by a colleague of mine in World Languages and Cultures, Kathy Leonard. She went to Bolivia, and she gathered the testimonies of women who work in the silver and tin mines. I think that, you shouldn't leave without taking a look at them. It's important, I think, to look at them because we should try to see life through the perspective of other people, especially the perspective of these oppressed and exploited women, but other groups too, the so-called racialized, minoritized, marginalized groups of our society. I sort of gravitated toward teaching ethnic studies and Asian American studies, trying to represent the perspectives, the expressions, the life ways of the 4% of Americans who trace their ancestry back to Asia. I'm also happy to be working with Francesca Galarraga and others on the President and Provost's Advisory Committee on Diversity. We're trying to figure out how best to operate. How do we promote diversity on this campus, which is predominantly white, which is in many ways Eurocentric in its perspective. We're wondering, how do we measure our success and our outcomes? Also, we tend to live our university academic life in so many silos. We're all in different departments, and our busy faculty, they have precious little time to work with students. They consider that student affairs, and if you spend too much time working with multicultural learning communities or with any of the ethnic identity communities, well, you're not going to get any credit toward tenure and promotion. But some of us do that. But we live in our silos. You see student groups, and you think of Beverly Tatum's famous work, "Why are the black kids sitting together in a cafeteria?" Something like that, right? Well, it's because they're friends, but why are they friends with other black kids, African American kids? Well, it's all because we seek others who are like us, who share a common background, common memory, common experiences. But in any place, anywhere, maybe it's in a university where we can shake things up, we can mix people together, where we can bring them together, and we can address some of our common concerns. As Manning Maribel said here a couple of days ago, the problems of our society are not based on ethnic concerns alone. There's no Asian American solution to the housing crisis. There is no African American solution to the deficiencies in our education system. There is no white solution to the problem of world hunger. We have to address these problems as they affect all of us. And to do that, we all have to get together. We have to communicate. We have to open up the lines of communication. We have to see through the prejudices of race. We have to see race, but we have to see through the illusion of race. I think it's a good idea to be color blind, but color conscious, as Jeffrey Johnson reminded us a few days ago as well. Race is a strong perceptual reality in our society, but we have to move beyond race. And I think our newly elected president is giving us a good example of how we can recognize race, but we can attempt to move beyond it.
Someone else. your perspective. Over here.
I'm Sheena Lara. I'm the graphic designer for the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, and I want to speak on what Anya was talking about, and also what Ashley was talking about. How if you go to diversity events, you see familiar faces, and Ashley is a familiar face to me because as undergraduates, we were involved in the same organizations, we went to the same events. And it's true, we need to attract new people. And I think one of the problems is how do we attract new people? And that is also tied into what Anya was saying about how do we promote diversity on campus. And being a graphic designer, I've always felt that there wasn't enough effort to get the word out about individual events, about campus events, about anything that was going on campus that happens, for socially anything. So I'm going to make a suggestion, and I don't know where to take it after this, but maybe we need to create a university organization that is there to support and promote diversity events, whether it's, ethnic specific, anything. I don't know where to take that or who to go to with this suggestion, but I'm going to throw it out there. That's one thing that I've always had a trouble with, being a student and being involved in those activities, and also being the director of student diversity for a year with GSB, is I always felt like we could never get enough people to come, and I always thought part of the problem was that we could never get the word out. And if there's any way I could help with that, I'd be willing to do anything that I can to help that problem.
I hope I don't get in trouble. Tell me your name again.
Sheena.
Sheena has brought up a question about getting the word out. I guess I'd throw out to you to ask you, think about it. As you think about how you choose to participate, what are the things that either influence or take away from our ability to engage in something that we are not part of? You're here today probably because you're interested in the topic. But if this wasn't this particular, how do you decide to participate in other ways in which it is not your group? Be that economic, major, race, whatever. How do you decide? What can you tell us that help inform the rest of us about decision making around participation?
Barbara, you were just saying that probably everybody's here because they're interested in the topic. So I'm curious. I'm just thinking, is there anybody here because they thought, I want to find out more about this? Right? Or have you come and participated in events like this in the past? How many of you have been at an event like this related to this in the past before? Or how many of you, is this the first time you've ever come or tried something like this? Cool. Well, let's start.
As the director of the lectures program, who's constantly promoting things, I feel compelled to say that we do have a diversity calendar. We have electronic emails going out, reminders. We are constantly talking to faculty and emailing faculty to announce in their classes. We fund with GSB funds and other funds that I'm constantly raising events and sending flyers out. The George Washington Carver performance was in the date book this morning, for example. I think what you're trying to address, more than the hundreds of trees that have died for our flyers, I think you know about that, is the fact that the buzz of the campus is so busy, and then with the economic concerns, how are you able to receive the message if it's out there? So that may be an angle to promote, to investigate, try to find a better way to reach the students and a committee on lectures member, Bree, would like to speak.
I was kind of thinking, when she was talking about supporting and giving new networks to other people, the best thing I would say to increase diversity, or at least the relevance of diversity at Iowa State, is you have to support the students, the diverse students at Iowa State. Because once I graduate, who's the best spokesperson for Iowa State? Your alumni. And if I haven't had a good experience, how am I going to go back and tell somebody else, oh, you need to go to Iowa State, it's the best place ever? You really do have to support the students and understand the realities of what you're working with. When you're talking about the same people being overrepresented at events, how many black people are at Iowa State? 600. How many Latinos? 600. How many? It's about 600 of each group. And so when you're thinking about, there's like 600 of each group, but then how many of everybody else? 22,000. So it's kind of, when you're trying to talk about being represented, it's hard when you're a smaller minority and then you have to be at everything. So to me, a better way of communicating would be somebody telling me, well, this is what this white fraternity is doing. This is what GSB is doing, without me having to be at every single meeting. Because that's the hardest barrier to me. Things are going on in GSB I have no idea about because I can't be at all the meetings. And it's really hard to find people, like some people care about leadership, some people come to college for a good time, but you don't have enough of those people going to all the meetings to report back to your community. Well, they're deciding this might be a good event for us to have, or this might not be what we're looking at when we're looking at diversity. So what you really need to do is kind of develop those networks to have something to tell us, okay, this is what's going on, this is how you can participate. Look at VISHA. How do you start getting in VISHA? You start freshman year, you get on the freshman council, and then you build your way up, and then pretty soon you're the head person of VISHA. How am I supposed to know that coming in without going through traditional networks as a student of color? It's really hard. So it's, to me, you really have to expand those networks so I can figure out how to navigate the methods and ways of Iowa State, coming from outside, not being a legacy, or my parents not having going through, knowing nothing of Iowa State. How do I navigate it in a successful way where I can participate in mainstream events?
Hi, my name is Nicole Rembert, and actually right now I'm on a committee called MESPAC, and it's the Multicultural Student Program Advisory Council. And right now we're actually in a process of looking for more people to come for us. We're a council that provides funding for diversity programs. So if anybody's putting on a program that focuses on multicultural issues or promoting campus or promoting diversity on campus, we look for those groups to come for us for funding. And a large part of our funding is based on collaboration with other groups. And I guess we seek more of the associations like Latino Graduate Student Association or Black Graduate Student Association or the Asian Pacific Student Association, but we want those groups to venture out and collaborate with, I guess let's say we're having a lecture on literature and Chinese culture. We want them to maybe go to the English department and look there to see if they can collaborate, and then you pull those students from that department, and that's another way that you can network and bring more students involved that wouldn't necessarily be involved in the first place. Like you reach out to other departments that might have some kind of common interest, and then bring them in so that you get other students involved in what you're looking for. But MESPAC, we have, I'm not sure what the website is, but if you do have any kind of multicultural issue or you're trying to promote diversity on the campus, we are looking for people who need that kind of funding. So,
Where would we find your website? I wanted to send a student for that.
I know you can go through Multicultural Student Affairs, but I'm not really sure.
Okay.
If you go to that website, you can click on the side column, because the Committee on Lectures operates the same way, and we collaborate with Ms. Pat. So.
My name is Derek Rollins, and faculty member here at Iowa State Statistics and Chemical Engineering. As I was sitting there listening, which has been very good, people have not only expressed their ideas but their emotions about those ideas, which is very good. And I think people have done a very good job of listening. When I think of what really begins to cause people to come out of their comfort zones and begin to interact, one of the important things that I have found is when we reach out to other people. You know, we have what we call white fraternities here. We have what we call black fraternities. We have white sororities. We have black sororities, Hispanic, Latino sororities, and so forth. And so we draw these barriers around things that we are involved around our organizations. And people tend to think that they are not invited, that's not for me. And it's very important to reach out. Let me give an example. I'm a faculty member of an organization called the National Organization of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers. It's SNAE. I was walking down the hall one day and saw a student in our department, Asian American student in our department who happened to be my advisee. And I said, come on and join me in come to the meeting that we're having called Novashe. And first she was like, I don't know, what is it called, And I told her what we were all about and encouraged her and really helped her to feel like I wanted her there. And she came to the meeting and she became so involved in that organization. She ended up being officer in 3 or 4 different capacities. She went to the annual meeting several times, very involved. She went to meetings where she was one of the few Asian Americans where you had a room full of African Americans. But she really felt at home. She felt accepted. She felt a part of that group. And when she graduated, at the reception, I felt really good because we give the students an opportunity to tell about an experience that they had when they were at Iowa State that really made them feel good. And she said, well, I really enjoyed going with Dr. Rollins to the Novashe meetings. And I thought, that experience really had a significant impact on her life. And a lot of the students that are involved in Novashe are not African American. They are Latino Americans, Asian Americans here on our campus, but it happened as a result of reaching out, seeing that they're us, they're a part of us. In fact, I've even started working really hard in recruiting white students to the National Organization of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineers. And I've been successful because we have white members this year at that organization. So it's very important to reach out, especially when we have these invisible barriers or these barriers that people think are there that are not really there, okay? But they will never know if you don't reach out and get them, and if you have to hold their hand to bring them to the first meeting, do it to make them feel comfortable, make them feel accepted. That's a really, in my opinion, in my experience, that's a really big part of it.
I would add to what Dr. Rollins has just said. I was a graduate student here many years ago, in the late 70s. And I think I'm still in Ames because of the connection made with my professor, who happened to be white, who engaged me, went out of her way to engage me in opportunities. And so part of it is connecting, regardless of who you are, connecting with someone unlike yourself, to engage them in understanding kind of what's going on and how they can be successful, how to be part of the system, if we want to say that. But part of it is the ability of someone who isn't like you to see value in you and take you along and encourage you. That becomes very, very important. I'm here 30 years. I've been here for 30 years. This is the 30th year. And I'm sure I'm here partly, one, I got a good job, but I don't think that was the most important thing. I really think it was about the relationships, participation in this community and in this on this campus.
I got one other good quick point that I forgot to mention. We shouldn't assume that because someone's not like us that they would not want to be involved in the kind of thing that we're doing. We should never make that assumption, and a lot of times we do. We think, because that person's not like me, they would not want to come and be a part of what we're doing. But that's not usually the case. They just need someone to invite them and ask them.
And if I could just add, what I'm hearing the conversation turn to is sort of this great idea of who's responsible. Who is responsible for making us, whoever that us is, feel like we're part of the other group. And I always share with individuals, I share with them the statement that I tell people, I'm Francesca, I'm with diversity. And the response that I will get is, of course you are. of course you do diversity work. You look like someone that should be doing diversity work. And I say that and I chuckle about it now, but the reality is that when we think about, and that's the difficulty with the word diversity, is when you think about diversity and when you talk about creating a more inclusive environment, immediately our thinking will go to, we need to get this marginalized group in with part of us. We never stop and really think of how do we get this group that's maybe not the marginalized group more integrated with us. And so making the burden not so much on the 600 African American or the 600 Asian Americans to become more involved, but helping the entire campus to realize that it's about you. Diversity is about you, regardless of what you look like, regardless of what you sound like, regardless of where you came from. And that's a different dialogue and a different conversation for us to have, and probably a more, I would say, in my perspective, a more difficult conversation to have. So when Dr. Rollins invites that Caucasian student to come to that Black organization, the struggle is not for the white student, and the struggle is not for the Black students to make that white student feel welcome. It's for that white student to understand why they feel welcomed and why that's important and how that has impact on them. And I think to Barb's point, for her, it worked that way. For me, I've been here a year, and when I look at my peers, I'm it. I say that quite frankly, and I say that quite jokingly. There's not a lot of, women of color in positions that have power of influence here at the university. And so I look at my boss and I look at the fact that she's been able to be here for 11 years and has made impact. And for me, when I look at her, it's like, she's been here all alone, and how do I help? And what's the next step? And it's not so much saying that it's up to me because I'm a woman of color that needs to make the impact, but it's the impact of having everyone else understand that they have impact on me as much as I have impact on them. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm Liz Beck, and I'd like to reinforce this reaching out. I'd like to ask those of you who are first-time attendees here to raise your hands again. And then I would like to ask those of us who keep coming to these things to come over to these individuals, introduce yourself, exchange emails and phone numbers, and the next time there's an event, call them up and bring them. It's nice to put out all the publicity, but in a university campus, the choices every hour are immense, and you have to pick and choose what you can do. And those of you that are students, your first job is to be a student, so you can't do everything. You can't let your academics suffer. I think it's a one-on-one as much as anything, and it is going up to these people saying, I really enjoyed this, how can I know more about them, and getting on listserv. It's for those of us who keep coming to these to look around and invite those students and those faculty to come back again, because I saw Dr. Matlow raise his hand. And that's how you're going to start to make an impact. It's that power of one and the ripple effect, and the next time they may bring a friend. And so you may start seeing the same people over and over, but the room may start to look a lot different. And I think what Dr. Rollins did just shows what happens when you take that first step, wherever you are. I don't care if it's in a room like this, but I would also ask you to reach out to an international student, because that's a very powerful population on campus that also we have a lot to learn from.
Comment. Experiences. How you can make it a more diverse conversation, how you can be involved.
Hi, my name is Melanie Smith. I work in the Office of the Executive Vice President and Provost. Part of my job is actually getting out some of that diversity-related, promotion events. I'm also on the MLK committee. And so part of our responsibility was to advertise this event. So we put it on Inside Iowa State, we put it in announcements, we didn't put an article in the daily, but again, it's what are those things that you attend to? It depends on what you're interested in, what's going to stick out to you and say, oh, I should try that out. I guess what I'm asking is, are there any specific suggestions of how do you get the information out and in a way that, make people want to pay attention to it? So for you, and then also for Bree, you talked about the responsibility of the institution and helping to create some of those social networks. Do you have any specific suggestions of what the university could do to help to kind of bridge that gap and help with those social connections?
In terms of the social connections, it was kind of, when I first got here, we had COCO, which is a community of color orientation. And so for me, that was really important in helping me meet older students of color and kind of being integrated into the society of Iowa State. You need to be in this club, you need to be on this committee. So you kind of have that relationship between older students coming to younger students and then building that relationship. COCO doesn't exist anymore. And so as an older student, I'm kind of finding that I have to meet younger students on a one-by-one basis. I meet you, I can maybe help you, but then there's like 200 people that I don't know. So you really don't have that kind of connection building that you had when I first got here. A number of student groups used to have Circle of Trust, Band of Brothers, A Society. Circle of Trust was to help African American women talk about their issues, kind of deal with the stress. I mean, if you look at the large university, they really do cut like psychological counseling, things like that. And so it was kind of more of an informal help group. We talk to each other. We deal with whatever issues we're going through. Band of Brothers was for males. A Society helped undergraduates get to know how to get to grad school. None of those programs are in place anymore. So now I'm an African-American woman trying to get to grad school. Who do I talk to? It's on a one-by-one basis. And so I just wish we could even go back to what I had coming back 2 years ago, would kind of be helping building those social networks. And I think when you're talking about reaching out and trying to bring other people in, it's really hard when you get wrapped up in your own organization. So you become all about BSA. So you're planning events for you because there's no other parties to go to. What other party? I mean, it seems like you can go and you can meet friends and I can meet all these other people. But to be honest, I really don't think I have a lot of white friends, my age students here at Iowa State, because I'm so busy trying to build my own identity and deal with my own isolation. So when you're asking me to go out and meet other people and bring them to other groups, I'm so busy focused on my own community, I really don't know them. So that's why I'm more concerned about building those relationships with other mainstream organizations so I can be represented in VSHA and I know I can go to this and have a good time, whereas it really doesn't feel like that right now. So.
And I think kind of to piggyback on what Bree said, there used to be an organization here called Identifying as Me, Identifying as Multi-Ethnic, and we reached out to all types of different groups because it was, I guess, I don't want to say, but there was a lot of different races that were involved in this group, and that no longer is here anymore. Last night we had a class and we discussed that there's the MVP scholars, the Carver scholars, McNair scholars. A lot of those groups, first-generation minority students, here to get through college, go to graduate school, they're not even interacting with each other. So I think that if we were to build leaders within these groups who are here to lead us, it would be helpful. And also bringing in maybe Caucasian students or, I'm sure there's Caucasian populations out there that have certain scholarships. How come we're not meeting with honors students with MVP scholars or things like that? So I think bridging the groups that we already have would be very helpful.
I think that's a great idea, Ashley, because I was an MVP scholar, and of course, those are the people that I talked to. We had classes on a regular basis. My sister was a Hickson scholar, and I think it would be awesome to get those two groups together to mingle and talk about the things that they do have in common. And to go back to what you were saying about how do we get the word out about the events that are going on, I saw this in Inside Iowa State through my email. I don't really have time to read it daily. I really rely on my email as my source of information. That's one big thing. The other thing is I completely forgot there is a listing of diversity lectures until you just mentioned that. Yeah, the calendar. And then something that we've been thinking about on a college level is what are the most important things that we need to place on our homepage? What are the most important things? And it seems to me that diversity is hugely important to Iowa State, but where do we see that on our homepage? And, I have that as my automatic homepage when I open my web browser. And I was trying to think back, okay, is there a link directly on the homepage to any diversity events or groups? And I can't think of anything. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm not looking, but maybe
on the left-hand side, there is a link to diversity. We'll take you to Diversity Iowa State, which is actually managed by the Office of Equal Opportunity Diversity. Okay. There was a long fight section on our homepage, and our committee
did meet with Diana Pam about communications, about getting more events on that homepage, and they are very protective of that space. And so we
Yes,
have to have
I'd like to
but-
verify. God could be coming to campus. We'd have a hell of a time getting him on the front page of the. Imagine the demands on there. But there is calendars, and if you go to that, you go to
All right.
that information.
And from a designer's point of view, I think our Iowa State homepage needs to be updated. It looks it's static. I think it could be redesigned to better attract students. It needs to reflect what's going on campus, and the rotating photos are great of the different seasons and things that are going on, but I also don't see very much diversity there unless it's like the little photo of the 2 minutes with someone. So maybe some changes need to be made there on a greater level that we can't handle right now. But we're working on it.
In the back.
Yeah, we're working on it.
I was still standing just because I wanted to make a point about advocacy and being our own advocates. And I can also identify with Ashley the isolation you feel as a graduate student. It's like, okay, you had all these programs and you used to be a graduate student. I didn't understand the language they were speaking as far as, thesis and all these things. And then you're a master's student, so you look stupid asking questions, or you feel like you're going to be stupid because everybody seems to already know, like the secondary students, and know exactly what's going on about all the conferences and things like that. And so some of it is, and I was never involved in BGSA, but I was involved in TEXA, which is a higher education graduate student organization. And even though we were in higher ed, and most of them got it more than other people, they still didn't get it. So it is kind of isolating, and you do have to kind of be your own advocate. For example, we had planned a graduation party, so I said I was going to step out of my comfort zone. I was going to participate in a graduation party that they were having at one of the bars on campus town, and they kept talking about this cake that they were buying. And I was like, well, what else are you going to have, Because I was like, my friends, we don't get around and drink beer. That's not a party to us, Are you going to have the DJ? What kind of music are you going to play? And they're looking at me like, okay, no, you're kind of mixing things up here. This is not how we party. But I said it anyway. I ended up not going to the party. But at least I let them know that they really were not, kind of thinking outside the box and really not including everybody. And they might have had a better party if they would have taken some of my suggestions. But that's just.
We're approaching 2 minutes off, and I'll take one more.
Hi, my name is Brittany Brown. I'm a second-year graduate student in Ag and Biosystems Engineering, and I actually went to an HBCU. For those who aren't familiar with that technology, I attended a historically black college university. And coming here as a graduate student, Melody and Ashley both were here as undergraduate students, so they were able to make the transition, but they still had some of their old friends there. I came from a small campus of predominantly African American students to a campus where I really didn't have that transition. I really didn't have anybody. Melody was actually one of the first people I met, and that was because we are in the same sorority. And that's kind of how I made that first connection with anybody who looked like me here at Iowa State. But my suggestion would be, at the university level, have there been any focus groups formed or anything of that nature to ask the students what they want? Because just like in government or any other agency, some people kind of sit at the top and they look down and say, I think this will work. But for me, the best thing is ask the students what work, because they're the students here. They're the graduate students. They're the undergraduate students. So at the university level, has there been, I guess, any effort to form these focus groups and ask the students what keeps them here and what keeps them interested? So that's just a suggestion that I have.
Like yesterday, there was something at Beardshaw that we were supposed to go to represent student groups and talking about diversity. But the thing was, I got the email on Tuesday. The event's on Wednesday at 11 o'clock to 11:45. Guess what? I'm at work. I'm at class. So when they try to have these discussions, they really don't take into account I'm a busy student. I'm like really trying to carry my community on my back. So when you tell me you have a forum and you want me to address diversity, you have it at a time I can't be there to have that discussion. Even this campus conversation, it's noon, but people are eating lunch. Like for me, this would be the only break I have during the day to actually eat something before I'm running back to class and then have 3 meetings later that day. So it's really, you're asking kind of overburdened people to even continue to contribute to whatever's going on. So you really have to kind of refocus and think, okay, they're busy students. What's going to get them there? How about you feed us or something like that? Just really be realistic with what you're going to get from if you want student participation. Having stuff at noontime when it's your lunch break and that's good for you, that's wonderful, but I'm not going to be there to help contribute to that conversation. You have to be realistic on the responsibility of a student and what I'm actually able to do given my limited time here at the university.
I'm going to stop the conversation and encourage us to go away thinking in terms of how can we include others in the conversation. Who are we with in which we can have a conversation that we can influence others, and who can we bring to a table to engage in a conversation so that we include more people in whatever it is we're trying to do with different perspective, different backgrounds, different whatever. But hopefully you'll find somebody you don't know and bring them into a conversation. Thank you all for coming. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.